Like no other, legendary photographer and videographer Clayton Patterson, dubbed by Anthony Bourdain the archivist of all things Lower East Side, has documented the often overlooked people and cultural contributions of New York's East Village and Lower East Side, sometimes finding himself in perilous situations as a result. For decades, Clayton has, as his friend Ai Weiwei puts it, relentlessly devoted himself to a kind of culture that examines authority. Best known for his documentation of the Tompkins Square Riots in 1988, Clayton lives at the intersection of numerous underground cultures, from drag queens to punks, gangbangers to tattoo artists, breathing the same creative energy that gave life to Keith Haring, Jean-Michel Basquiat, the Talking Heads, Blondie, and other New York icons. Julien Valoge is an award-winning photographer and author who has published 4 collaborative graphic novels to date: Ghetto Brother, Joe Shuster, Basquiat, and most recently, Clayton. So I'm very pleased to turn the evening over to all of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's exciting to be here, and it's also interesting because we're speaking about preservation, and Clayton is really someone who has preserved history of the Lower East Side like no other. And since not everybody might be familiar with Clayton, we actually wanted to start off with showing like a small clip from a documentary called Captured that came out in 2008. And it gives you like a little bit flavor of who Clayton is.
You could almost be anybody you wanted to be on the Lower East Side. If you wanted to dress up as a woman, you could dress up as a woman. If you wanted to be a skinhead, you could be a skinhead. I always had sort of an interest in preserving history. Looking out on the street, it's like being in an aquarium, and when I look out on the street, I see this activity all day long.
From a filmmaking point of view, it's great.
You don't have to go very far to get a really good shot.
The art scene in that crime-ridden area was really exciting and really vibrant.
Here we are in the Lower East Side of New York City. This place is great.
There's a lot of things we all saw, but even really stupid if we pulled out a camera.
Quality of life was not high on the agenda, and you could see it. It was not a pretty picture.
People laying on the street dead with a needle out of their arm. They never cared because it didn't matter down here.
No! From the real community of the Lower East Side, come forward! They were here before any of these fucking yuppie stuff!
There's been so much change. We've documented that religiously.
Oh, my camera. You have a right to have it documented. Clayton, so tell us about the videotape that you took.
What? What'd you say to me? What'd you say to me?
Relax. A camera became such a weapon.
He refused to hand over his videotapes. I got more cops in trouble than anybody in history of America with those tapes and subsequent tapes.
It's a revolutionary tool. Little brother just watching Big Brother.
I'm getting that a life, a breath of fresh air, a place in the universe.
So this was a clip from the movie Captured that came out in 2008. And so the film basically is based mostly on Clayton's photography and videography. And so we tell in the graphic novel, Clayton, his life in comic book form. So it is a very different medium, but it's also in many ways a homage to Clayton as a photographer and videographer. And so it actually starts with the cover. For those of you who have a smartphone, you can download an app at Archive. And when you hold your app onto the cover, even on the image that you see now on the screen, if you go to the website, you actually can see a video of Clayton talking to the audience. Clayton, can you tell us a bit about how did we even come up with this idea and who did the video?
Yeah, it's actually, in terms of the neighborhood, there was a group around here called Jump Into the Light and over on Orchard Street. And they had an arcade and sort of a science, technology-oriented computer space. And they were very sort of open and accommodating to the community. So they did a number of events over there, and I did events with them. And they had like 360 cameras and, you know, VR and AR and a green room and all of that. So with Nahayan and Mihao and them, we went over there, and that's how we got this cover for the book, which I think is kind of a first, but I think with Julian. And so Jump Into the Light was, you know, a very special new business that came into the neighborhood. We really hope they survive. They were very generous to us.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool to have an augmented reality cover. So it's like a new technology we're using here. But the cover itself is also pretty awesome, and it's designed by Fabrice Sapolsky. So first of all, I want to welcome Fabrice and thank him for the great work. He designed actually the whole book. Among other things, he is the co-creator of Spider-Man Noir. But Fabrice, tell us a bit about who you are, and then tell us about the idea for the cover.
So hello, everyone. I don't see anything right now. I just see the cover and Julian. So I don't know if everyone sees just that.
We see you.
We can
you see us. Okay,
yeah.
wonderful. The covers. When Julian approached me, it was in 2016, I believe.
Yeah.
To talk about the book, and at first, the first thing that he wanted me to draw a short story, and I was not as good as an artist as I am now, because I started my career as a writer, and then because I love art and I wanted to have a bigger convention presence in the comic book world. This is pretty much an artist territory, so I decided that I wanted to teach myself how to draw. So that's what I did. So I was not really as good as I am now. And I was very frustrated because the short story that Julian offered me to draw, I was struggling with the story, with the layout, and so I kept lagging and dragging my feet. And at one point, he said to me, "Look, that's all right if you don't do it. We'll have somebody doing it, but I still want you on the book. How about you're doing the design, because I like your designs." And it's true. I mean, I've been a graphic designer for 25 years on top of being in the comic book world as a professional. So he knew what I was capable of doing. And I had very little information, I have to say. Like the only thing that I had was, I had a bunch of photos of Clayton, of course. And I met Clayton while I was in New York. Now I live in LA, but at the time I was in New York. So he took me to Clayton so that we could have a conversation. It was great. But I basically had only that. I had like a bunch of photos, and I wanted to, first, let me talk about the font. The font choice was like, I always thought that the style of font that we have here is a serif font. And the serif fonts have something like they're pretty classic, but I wanted something bold, like really ultra bold, because it was just one word and it was Clayton's name. So I chose that, and I added the period at the end, and to my surprise, it remained on the cover. I didn't think it would make it, but like, to me, it was like Clayton period. Like, it's definitive. There's nothing after. He's the man. And same thing for Godfather of the Lower East Side documentary. It was just like a sentence, and I thought like, how about we suggest a skyline like of New York, but very, very rough, very simple, and that also remained on the cover to my surprise. So it was kind of like a step-by-step process. I was like adding stuff as we went, and you know, I was working from a distance from LA at that time. I was already in LA when I started doing the cover, and so it was very hard for me to have more conversations with Julian and of course Clayton for that. Now, regarding the part that is the graphic part on the right, it's going to be like, there's a funny story about that. I wanted something that reminded art, but at the same time that was kind of pop art, but not really. And my inspiration came from a reality TV show that was broadcasted in France in the early 2000s. And it was just like the picture of an eye like this. And I was like, it was like great. And then you also have on the other side of the spectrum, the logo for the San Diego Comic-Con, which is also an eye, and it's like has this Art Deco style. And so I kind of mixed both of it and redrew Clayton's face. At first, it was just a small portion that was just around the glasses, but then they asked me to extend it a little bit, and I started drawing the nose and the beard and all that. It was fun. I mean, actually, I have a bigger version with more of the beard and more of the nose and a part of the other side of his face, but I never showed it. So maybe one day.
Now you're telling me.
Yeah, sorry. But I like it like that, so that's
why.
It's
perfect. It's perfect. Thank you, Fabrice. And it's actually interesting. You actually hit some very important points. Unlike other graphic novels I did, this is an anthology, and we'll speak a little bit about the whole concept of it in a bit. But it was actually also a community project, and because I tried that every artist who worked on this actually met Clayton, got a flavor of him. So it was very important to build also community. And I want to quickly speak about the subtitle. So Clayton, tell us about this photograph and the idea for the subtitle of the book.
Okay. Anthony Bourdain was sort of looking to recapture his youth. And when he was young and just starting off as a chef, he used to come to the Lower East Side. And he'd go to places like CB's and like that. And he was familiar with the neighborhood, but he was also doing heroin at the time. And I knew I had a heroin bag collection. So he was looking for one particular bag called Toilet, which was, I think, 3rd and B. And so he, came by and wanted to see that. So I was able to find it for him and show him. And he also had, very remarkable knowledge of the Lower East Side. So he also asked me to hook him up with some neighborhood people. So since he already had the Lydia Lunches and the Joe Colemans and like that, I connected him to like skateboarders, tailor, a cooking place, people from the neighborhood. And he was really a good guy. And he's the guy that called me the Godfather of Lower East Side documentary. And sadly, it was not too long after this that he ended up passing from this world. So that was a big loss for me because he was very sort of, very accommodating, very endearing, very kind of accessible kind of person. And well loved. My God, it was amazing how many people were touched by him.
Absolutely. And actually, in a way, that's a very typical Clayton photo because you are documenting or photographing people in front of your front door. So this is like the front door to your home. So you have thousands, if not tens of thousands of photographs of people in front of your door. Can you just talk about this project for a second?
Yeah, the front door project is, actually, I'm changing the skull in the background now. It's going to be tags. And I photographed the front door, probably starting in 85, 86 or something like that. So I started photographing the neighborhood. And obviously, a lot of the people that you photograph in front of a door are people that are related to the streets. So, you got a lot of graffiti crews and different posses and things like that. And also a lot of kids coming and going from school and stuff like that. So some of the ones I photographed when they were kids, because there's an elementary school across from where I live, now have grandkids. So it's really incredible because it's now kind of just using the front door as a backdrop. And it's right there on the street, right across from the school. It's open for everybody to see. And, I have this multi-generational history, really, of the Lower East Side, of just people. And, I'm much more interested in sort of regular people than the stars and like that. Not that I'm immune to photographing Mick Jagger or whatever, but it's much more interesting for me to capture a lot of the people that other people overlook. Because that's the real sort of essence of a neighborhood. And so I have this huge archive that sort of bounces around the front door. And then I used to take 32 pictures that I took in front of the door and put them in my window. So that was making, especially a lot of the youth types in the neighborhood, famous. So they could 24 hours a day look in the window and look for their picture, mira, because it's mostly Hispanic. And so it was 24 hours a day. And so you had the Wall of Fame, which was the tags on the door. And then you had the Hall of Fame, which were the pictures. So that's an ongoing project that started in the mid-'80s. It's still going on to this day. And so Bourdain is just part of that process.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the whole structure of the book itself. So I mentioned that while we saw the clip of Captured, and Captured obviously shows like all the different cultures you were involved with, from CBGBs, the punk rocks, the gangs, the drag queens. I mean, there's so much basically, and so much diversity in the experiences you had. So the idea of this anthology was like, in a way, reflecting visually the diversity of the experience. So we have 18 artists involved with this, and the idea was every artist brings their own style and really brings their own identity to these projects. We wanted to pay homage to you as a photographer and a videographer. So we already mentioned the augmented reality cover at the beginning. You have the app. You can actually have a video of Clayton, 45-second clip of Clayton talking to you once you download the app and hold it above the cover. But we're also using a fumetti as a framing device. So the fumetti is an Italian word. It means speech bubble. But it also is used in American English for basically photo comics. So the idea was that the framing device is the story of a journalist, played by Sean Cathedral, coming to Clayton's place and then interviewing him about his life on the Lower East Side. And we shot the whole thing one afternoon, several hours. We're just like hanging out at Clayton's and shooting all the photographs for this. And it was a lot of fun doing this. And so this is a framing device, and always between chapters. So you talk about your childhood, an illustrated chapter, then you go back to the photo comic. So it's going back and forth. It's something that wasn't done this way before, but the idea actually comes back from American Splendor. Some of you might know the movie, but also the series, where they're using the same thing. But here it's the first time we're using this idea in a comic book. And one of the early chapters, for us, of course, Clayton is always, as Fabrice said, the period is like Clayton, that's it, he's the man, and he is so much associated with the Lower East Side. But actually, Clayton is Canadian, like so many others, he's an immigrant to the Lower East Side. And one of the early chapters actually deals with his upbringing. He was an educator in Canada, in rural Canada, and he also, studied art and design. This chapter is by Jesse Lambert. So Jesse, I first invite you to talk actually about you as an artist. What are you doing? And I know you have a show actually right now up, a physical show, which is great. So just speak a little bit about your process, working process, and also who you are as an artist.
Okay, I actually have just relatively recently started making comics and have been an artist for a longer time, doing like non-sequential art. So I have a show that's up actually on the Lower East Side right now, and it was a show that was scheduled in February before any idea of like what was going to happen with COVID, and there were many months of like wondering if it was going to happen, and in the end, when the opening kind of coincided with having the show, we decided to do it. So it's on 48 Hester Street, and we had an opening last week, social distancing, masks, everything. So anyways, I show my work in galleries and stuff like that, but I've always been really interested in comics. And
Hester.
I'm sorry?
That's very far east on Hester. That's Hester and what?
It's like right off of Ludlow. It's like on the corner of Ludlow. It's called, the gallery's called Front Room Gallery.
Okay.
They're kind of new to the Lower East Side, but they were in Williamsburg for like 20 years. So they're a great gallery. And when they were in Williamsburg, they're very kind of community oriented, did a lot of performance and different kinds of projects and stuff. But they also,
they had I known, I would have gone in there.
Well, it was a Brazilian restaurant before they moved in, and I guess they went out of business, and they got kicked out of Williamsburg. They'd been in Williamsburg for like 17 years, I think, and they got kicked out and then replaced with like a high-end clothing store. So they, you know, as part of the process, they were looking at places in Williamsburg, and they realized like actually the Lower East Side is cheaper than you know, renting a space in Williamsburg. So that's how they ended up in the Lower East Side. But anyways, you know, I've always been really into like comics, and comics have always kind of informed my style of drawing. So I started working comics a little bit, and maybe about 4 years ago or something, maybe a little longer. And then Julian invited me to do this piece. And this is the first thing that I've ever really finished in terms of comics. And I drew it, you know, a few years ago. I really love the process of it because in this part of Clayton's story, there were a lot of things that I could personally relate to. Going to art school, you know, teaching, and then also I really enjoyed drawing the final page of visiting New York because you know, I remember New York of the 80s. So like for me, it was like being able to kind of revisit that and draw it and work a little bit with my memories, but also like, you know, kind of like look for a lot of references online and stuff. And there were all these like kind of elements of that part of the story that I just really connected with. This page in particular, it was fun to do like the subway scene and coming out of the subway. And when I was in high school, I used to work for a couple of graffiti artists that were older than me in the late 80s. And I snuck in a couple of tags in the subway panel because it was kind of a little homage to some of my old friends from the late 80s. So anyways, that was, you know, I really enjoyed that, you know, that, I mean, all the pages, but that page like kind of was like a full circle for me. So yeah, I don't know. Clayton, do you have anything, like, I'm curious what, how you felt about these pages, Clayton?
Yeah, so I want to know the name of the tags.
The main one that's like, is Freedom. I don't know if you knew the graffiti writer Freedom, but he did the Freedom Tunnel on the Upper West Side underneath.
Oh, okay.
Underneath Riverside Park, and he did like a huge Goya painting in there and a James Dean mural, and so it's kind of like hidden to the left of you.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. So Freedom, like I actually dated his sister, his younger sister, and that's how I met him. And he helped me get a couple of jobs painting some record stores with him. And we actually, we renovated the pop shop together.
Really?
Yeah, which was really cool because, like, you know, it was after Keith Haring had passed away, but
you did the whole black and white interior?
Yeah, we, because it had really like kind of degraded after many years, which
I'd like to talk about that one of these days.
What was that?
I said Julian and I would like to just talk about that as a separate subject one of these days.
Yeah, it was such a cool experience, and you know, Chris was like, you know, he was friends with Keith Haring, and he kind of thought that Keith would like it being degraded and wouldn't want it to be renovated. So he was a little bit like, you know, unsure of doing that. But we went to Keith Haring's foundation and got his brushes, and we actually, when we renovated the interior mural, which was ceiling, floor, and walls were all painted in the signature black and white, we used Keith Haring's brushes to repaint it. That was like the coolest thing that I did with that group. But also there's a artist Crash, John Matus, that I also worked for too. Crash and Days. There was a kind of group of they were a little older than me, that I ended up helping them out. Anyways, that's that's a kind of a tangent, but I love the, you know, like the old New York aspect really brought a lot back for me.
Yeah, very cool.
Clayton, you want to add something about like the content of the pages? I mean, maybe about your experience being in rural Alberta, working in the public school system?
Actually, you captured this school actually very great. It's you captured it better than I described it, because that's really what it was like. And I was away from the school, which meant that we could do whatever we wanted. So I could have batik, which could smell the whole room up and whatever. So we did a lot of crafts, because in art, you get sort of from the A student to the D student. And also, you know, you try to make things concrete. So how do you make a sweater, like an art project, you know? How do you knit something? So I thought, wow, let's make it really as clear as possible. So since I was in the country, I got a sheep. Farmer brought in a sheep. We sheared the sheep. You know, after you start to shear the sheep, you feel the wool and your hands get all gooey. And then you realize that it's lanolin, and the lanolin comes from the wool. So your hands are all sort of lanolined up. And then we made dyes. We went out and collected a lot of, you know, stuff from nature to try making dyes. We made different colors. We tried Kool-Aid, coffee, berries, all kinds of things. So it was a whole learning experience. And then we got down to weaving material. And actually, even though I was out of the city by 20 miles or something, we actually got this story into the city paper, the Edmonton Journal. So I don't know how that happened, but that was kind of a good deal. So it was very, very hands-on. And it was also very sort of intriguing, because you had kids from the farm that knew all about this, and you had kids from town that didn't. And then we had two Native American tribes close by. You had the Enoch, which were rich, because they had oil. Then on the other side, you had the Paulban, which were poor, and they didn't have anything. So you had all of these different sort of classes and ethnicities and whatever. But it was an incredible experience for me. It was really one of the highlights of my life, was teaching. So that was really great. And you did a nice job. It's really nice and clean, very readable.
Thank you. Thanks.
Let me just 1 second. Let's go to the next page. So let's talk a little bit about your experience at the Nova Scotia College for Art and Design.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Actually, the Pattersons, I don't know, they came to the Nova Scotia, or the North America, in like 1600s or something. They were escaping from Scotland. Then they ended up in Nova Scotia, and they were there for, I don't know, until the Pattersons, some of them migrated west and became pioneers in Saskatchewan. So for me to go back to the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, in a way, kind of like going back to some roots that I didn't know anything about, I guess. And it was a very interesting school, because it was very connected to New York. And at that time, they used to do weekend excursions where you came to New York. So we slept on the floor of Franklin Furnace, which was my sort of introduction to Franklin Furnace. And just coming to New York, and New York was really sort of bummy at that time. But it was great for me, because I realized that I could live there.
Yeah.
If you came to New York now and you looked at it with everything, you know, the $18 hamburger and the $15 beer and all the rest of it, it would be very hard to think I could live here. But at that time, when you had the 99-cent breakfast and inexpensive food and Subway and everything, you know, 25-cent slice of pizza or whatever, I just knew it was possible to come here and live here. And that whole sort of accumulation of so many different parts, even this part of this panel, parts of it touched the Lower East Side. So you had all these different kinds of artists and filmmakers, and, you know, it was really incredible. And then for somebody like let's say, Sean, you know, you got the rock and roll, you got the punk rock, you got, you know, you got, what's his name, where Jimmy was at the...
Trash and Vaudeville.
Yeah, Trash and Vaudeville, and I Want More in the end. So it was just really rich, dense culture, which is really kind of been stripped away of so much about what New York was. It's really nothing what it used to be. So I'm glad to have kept alive a lot of the memory of that period in time, because it will never go back to that.
Yeah.
We were like the Wild Wild West, and now it's like the humdrum East or something. I don't know.
And we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But yeah, so that actually was a perfect segue. So this is an illustration from Sean Catedral, who has like several chapters. So Sean, tell us a little bit about your chapter, or some of your chapters, I mean, and also your experience, because also for you, it was the first graphic novel experience.
Can you go back one picture first?
Absolutely. 1 second. Let me just go back here. Yep.
So this is
Okay, I was just going to
1979, right, Clay?
Well, I was just going to ask you about that picture in the front, the left, where it said Fear City. That looked like that leather store. What was that leather store called? You remember?
I don't know.
Oh, God. You're so much into that whole punk look and all of that. But,
there's that old, the really old leather shop. It was just called the Leather Shop.
Yeah, it might have been just a leather shop. Because then I know, go to the next picture, you have like, I see the Keith Haring thing and that in there. So there's a lot of historic references here to the period in time. You know, you got Rat Fink, you know, you all these little, you know, cultural cues.
There's a little dude, and next to the police officer in that top panel in the bottom right, there's a little dude who's kind of looking to the left. His cuts that were on the back of his vest kind of got like a little cut off because of the bordering, but it's supposed to be a guardian, like one of the guardian angels in the neighborhood too.
Okay, well I see Warhol and Madonna.
Basquiat, Keith Haring's there, Grandmaster Flash.
So Sean, tell us a bit, I mean, how was this experience working a graphic novel? I mean, how did you come to this project?
Well, I've been drawing for a very long time, various things, you know, little graffiti, like slap stickers, a lot of paintings. I've shown in like small galleries before this. And then I did my web comics, Bodega Dreams. And then I met Julian at Mocha Fest for when he was showing Ghetto Brothers. And we kept in touch ever since. And then he recruited me for this project. And first time I had to draw sequentially, even though I went to FIT for illustration, the comic book class was actually an elective, which I thought was BS, but well, that's a whole nother thing. So it was my really like first time besides the web comics drawing sequentially and with a script. And thank God there's a script, because I think it's just like my own kind of ADD where like my imagination kind of like would have just gone wild if I didn't have to stick to something, especially with, you know, the subject matter being clay and this whole neighborhood that I grew up hanging out in, at least in my younger years. I kind of avoid these places now. But yeah, the process I think went very smoothly, having had a script. Besides that, it was more just like me trying to, I guess, capture the emotions, trying to include all the details that I wanted to include. Like in this page that we're showing, you know, it's like every single person on the street. I think this is exactly how St. Mark's looks these days, like Lower East Side in general. And then I put a little, I don't know if you guys know who Claw is. She's this like graffiti chick. She's really big. And I put one of her little claws on that wall over there. Mm-hmm. I included a lot of people in some of my pages. There's like some old school people.
Claw?
Yeah, I put Claw, but this was like for a more modern one since she's not as like old school as some of the like as far as like for the timeline, she's part of like the more modern timeline in the pages that I drew. But I put like Cope and Doze and like Ja and a lot of the ones that are from back in the day. It was really fun to kind of, I guess, like, you know, pay homage to some of these idols in that realm, because I mean I think graffiti in New York is just hand in hand.
Thank you. And it's also interesting. So in this picture, you know, we see Clayton with a camera. So my question for you, Clayton, why did you even start? You know, you started, and this brings us to the next chapter. You started actually not as a photographer or videographer, even if we know you, you know, as mostly for your photos and videos from the Tompkins Square Riots, which will be discussed later. But why did you start photographing and documenting?
A couple of things. One is I just want to say that there's a subtext to this whole thing, which is becoming clear. And that's anybody who meets Julian somewhere, he changes their life in one way or another. they get some sort of project or something that takes off into a whole day.
I get people to work, yes.
So that's great, beneficial for me. You know, I did a whole thing, about 40 pages about what a camera means to me, and I'd like to try to get it published someday. It's kind of about, you know, how a camera sort of changed my life. And basically, and I hooked up with Elsa in 1972, and we've been together ever since. And she got me a camera. They used to have these, you know, drugstores like Dwayne Reed types and banks used to, you know, do things, give away product to get people to come into the bank or the drugstore. So they used to have like cameras or irons or something like that. So Elsa got me for my birthday this camera in about 1972. And I got a Panasonic 125. And so it just really took me, you know, it's kind of like you have to make use of what you have at the time that you're doing it. Like in order to survive as an artist, it's fun to think, and some people can, I couldn't, to come to New York and just survive as a painter. Usually you have to do a lot of other things. I mean, for a while I was a printmaker. I printed other people's, you know, lithos and etchings. I also was also a printmaker, you know, taking pictures. The camera was a vehicle that got me into a lot of places I would have never been had it not been for the camera. And then just things start to accumulate, you know, so pretty soon you get an archive, and then the archive turns into something else. And so the camera's taken me on a long journey of life, and it's been with me since 1972.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's really changed my life. And also, I would say for a lot of people, it's a great social tool, you know, especially if you're somewhat shy or something, because you can go to a place and you're going to have something to do because you're working and you have a reason to be there. So you can be taking people's pictures, but maybe you're not so great at mingling. So this way you can have a presence there, have something to do, and you got a reason to be there, and you're actually functional, and you're actually meeting people, and you can actually connect with them later and show the pictures to that person. And you can also go up to anybody that's there, including the president, and take his picture or her picture. So
Yeah.
that's part of the thing with the cameras, that it makes a lot of things very accessible. And there's a lot of, it's a real useful tool to live in a place like New York, because it can give you access to a lot of places you would never have access to.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about your other non-video and photo work. So you started, of course, you know, you're also a painter, designer. Your hat, I mean, your iconic hats.
Yeah.
So this is a chapter by Ray Felix. Ray, are you here with us?
Ray took a dive. There he is. He's back.
All right.
He's back.
Tell us a bit about yourself, and you know how you got to the project, and what are your pages about?
What do you want to know about me? You know me already.
I know you, but not everybody who's on this call. So.
Okay. Well.
Mohawk.
I'm a.
Mohawk.
What did you say, Clayton?
What happened to the blue mohawk?
It grew out. it's like well, I don't know. I'm a cartoonist, comic book artist. I started Kappa Java Studio in 2000, self-publishing, doing the comic book convention circuit. Then 2008, I started doing Bronx Heroes. The company changed its name to Bronx Heroes, which included not just doing comics, but I also expanded to like curating gallery shows and comic conventions in the Bronx. And also I used that resource, using that platform of a comic book convention to actually sell and promote the Bronx Heroes comics. And, you know, just being an educator for 24 years in the Bronx and elsewhere. So, and I met Clayton through Julian, I believe, at the 45th anniversary of the peace treaty signing, which was Benji, and I also met Elsa that time, and it was kind of funny because I had a broken arm, and I think it was Willie that made some comments on Facebook, and then he started like this crazy. So he started some beef in the gangs again. These.
So just for those who are not aware, so my graphic novel Ghetto Brother dealt with an iconic gang truce in 1971, and we organized in the Bronx for the 45th anniversary a panel. Clayton also did a book on the gangs of the Lower East Side, so he was on the panel that we organized as one of the experts.
Right. So he almost ended the peace treaty.
Exactly. So tell us a bit about this chapter, Ray. What we see here, and your you know.
I believe I don't remember, but I do believe this is probably one of the experiences that Clayton has as a young man in the gallery, where he is seeing the plasticness of it all, the whole art scene as not being real, somewhat fake, and being removed from it. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Clayton. So we have Warhol, Basquiat, we have Clayton, I think that's Bowie and some other people there. And Clayton is observing one of the artists being interviewed, and he's just not feeling it. So,
well, I guess in the beginning when I was coming here, I had this whole sort of idealism and this whole sort of romantic idea about people talking about art, living art, and doing all of that. And then when you get here, by the time you get to Soho, you realize it's really just a social scene and a careerist scene.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
So it really, it took me a long time to adjust to that idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that Renee had a I Am the Best Artist. Renee had a similar experience where he had his own gallery in Soho. He was a talented artist from Venezuela, but he wasn't part of the scene, even though he started painting I Am the Best Artist all over the Lower East Side and Soho, pissing off all those socialites. So, I mean, yeah, I think anyone who grew up in New York during that time and came to New York City really experienced that. Being in the mix of it, like you said, this was a place where people can come and dream and have a burger for a quarter and survive. And
Lower East Side was much more accommodating and welcoming for a person like myself. Soho was really about more, where did you go to school? You went to Yale, that's great.
Right, yeah, it was.
Or what gallery are you with? And I mean, I was doing okay. I was getting, one-man shows and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a social scene, really. It was about going to the Mr. Chow's for supper.
Yeah, I think Tom Wolfe talks about that in The Painted Word a lot. That was published, I guess, in the early 2000s or late 90s. I can't remember. He talks about how art collectors just collect each other's friends' work, and that's basically how they control the art world, is by just buying each other's and referring each other's artwork. But getting back to the page, I digress. We have, I think this is Clayton is witnessing outside of the gallery, one of the Satan Sinner. How do you say it? Satan Sinners nomads being chased down by a black spade and being shot at. So, I mean, why don't you tell us about that experience? It's your life. This is just a drawn page.
But, well, actually, it was an interesting story how I met this. It was through the camera again. And at one time, it went from the police riot in '88 to eventually a large tent city in Tompkins Square Park, because there was a homeless crisis in New York City in that period of time, late '80s, early '90s. So there was hundreds of people living in the park. And, some of the people that lived there were like Satan sinners in that. So there was a girl that a punk rock girl, and she, sort of had a thing about me. So she was telling the Satan sinners that I was taking pictures and giving them to the cops. So of course that created a whole little storm. So they came to my place, banging on the door and saying, "What's up?" whatever. So we were able to sort of work through that little problem. And then we became very good friends. And eventually Cochise, Jose Cuelas, he ended up, trying to murder a couple of their gang members. And he ended up, he just recently got out of jail after 18 years. But he got heavily involved in art. And I guess kind of part of it was through meeting me, was he started to realize that art's a really important thing, and it was important to him, and he was good at it. So he became heavily involved in art and making art. And, then we...
To the camera, your face disappeared. So there you go. You looked headless for a second. Sorry about that. Continue.
That joke. We just had a headless guy around the corner. But so anyway, it took me deep into gang culture, and I documented them for a long time. We remained good friends. And Cochise and I did a book, Street Gangs in the Lower East Side, which talks about the history of street gangs in the Lower East Side. Lower East Side, see, one of the great things as well about the novel, about the graphic novel, is sort of illustrating the Lower East Side. So much of the history is like Bronx and Harlem, like the graffiti history, the hip hop history. It's really well known in those areas. A lot of it's not well known on the Lower East Side. So we're trying to also bring out and save that culture. So
yeah, it's very true. The book is, of course, it's your life story, but it's also a time capsule of the Lower East Side and your experiences in this neighborhood. Since you brought up the Tompkins Square homeless crisis, it actually is a perfect segue to the next artist, Summer McClinton. Summer actually worked with Harvey Pekar, known from American Splendor. So Summer, tell us a bit about your chapter that we see here.
Okay, so hi, I'm Summer. My chapter is dealing with the Tompkins Street or Tompkins Square riots or protests.
Police
and
riots.
What's that?
Police riots.
Police riots, yes, police riots, thank you. I was thinking about this today and the distinction between the riot and the protests, and yeah, the police riots, which Clayton documented. And this was, I guess, like sort of an evolution of your documenting what was going on, Clayton, and this really struck a nerve with people because it exposed police brutality and, you know, the fact that the police are holding this line against nonconformity, and, you know, it's extremely relevant right now to be thinking and talking about this stuff, and it was really relevant then as in the fact that it just exposed these this kind of the facade of the police as protectors. And I used a lot of photo reference for this piece, which I'm sure Clayton can recognize. A lot of this is his photography that I translated as drawing. And I think for documentary comics, which I work in kind of a lot, I like to sort of step back as much as I can in terms of my own view, and try to be as much of a clear filter as I can be, to try to bring across the realness of it, I guess. So there's a lot of actual stuff happening here. There's my mind is blank right now. I know this guy at the top corner. Tell me his name again, Julian. Allen Ginsberg, yeah. Allen Ginsberg up there. And this is the Oprah page. And
love Oprah's hair.
Drawn Oprah a few times. She's such a distinctive person.
Yeah.
Her look. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I really enjoyed you know, just the density of the characters and the chaos, and it was really a pleasure to work on. And I don't know, Clayton, how you feel about how this is relating to what's happening now, but it was really interesting to me to have this come out at such a relevant time.
Well, you know, what happens is it loses the meaning of the protest, and it just turns into a conflict between the police and the protesters, because, you know, you get hit with a rubber bullet, or you get hit by a baton or something else, and it hurts. You know, it turns you into an anger against the police. So they're just setting up these sort of conflicts that become unending. And then about what the protest is about, now about the cops and the brutality. And they kind of steal the
right.
And it's kind of unfortunate that we always get locked into that, because most of what it's about has nothing to do with the problem. It has to do with police being out of control or a conflict with the police. And that's not what the problem was about. So how do you avoid the police? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's like they reframe it in this situation about, you know, control and violence, which is how they operate. And it's, you know, they grab that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, in this night, it was really, they came into the neighborhood really looking to kick ass. They went into restaurants, they went into bars, they went into all kinds of places where they shouldn't have been. And so it then becomes a police conflict and no longer about, you know, the homeless or whatever, the, you know, Floyd or whatever the protest is about. And it becomes what the police take over. And that's a shame.
Clayton, I want to also just like, I mean, in a way, it's very fascinating that, you know, it became, when we worked on it, you know, it was like something of the past, but it became very current events because you really were one of the first persons who, with like a huge camera, but, you know, documenting with your camera, like people today with their cell phone, the misconduct of the police. Can you just tell us how you were even introduced to the camera work?
Yeah, this was really kind of a transition time. It was the beginning really of what has come to be called, in a way, citizen journalism. And really, up until this time, it's not that anybody had ever documented a riot before, a protest or whatever, but this was taking the new technical equipment that was available to the public at that time. This was the bringing in of the first time of the handheld, you know, video camera with low light. It wasn't a tube camera. You didn't need the extra, you know, it contained everything. It was good with low light. It recorded, had everything all in one camera, just that small camera that I'm holding in the air on Oprah Winfrey. And that's where that saying, little brother is watching big brother. So I was able to have a real impact on the documenting of the citizen and the police, because this was like, and I really pushed the issue, obviously, you know, Oprah Winfrey, I was on a lot of TV shows. I really pushed the fact that you as a citizen have the right to document the police and to capture the, you know, the wrongdoings that's going on and to be able to do something with it. And that kind of, you know, I had the young Black Panthers tell me, because they used to do a Manhattan Neighborhood Network show, that people would actually also come and I would put my tapes on. So it really was getting out the idea that the neighborhood could protect itself through the use of the camera. And it opened up a whole kind of thing, you know, Cop Watch, you know, really became sort of known after that, because that's what we were doing. We were watching cops doing illegal and wrongful behavior and capturing. I was good at it in those days. I got a lot of cops in trouble with the video camera. And this was a whole new technology. And I had kind of had the desire to do it. So, you know, it was really kind of, it was a difficult time, but it was an inspiring time.
Yeah. So there's one anecdote, and this is my last question from the official part. You mentioned also that the police tried to confiscate your tapes, and you basically declared it art. Can you just talk about this? And I will, while you talk, I actually will show also where people can buy the book, because they can actually get it straight from you, a signed copy, and also they can contact you directly. So I'm just blending it in.
Straight from Ray. I want to qualify that. Ray's the guy.
Ray is the guy.
He's the guy. When you open up your happy package in the mail, you got that from Ray. Ray's good at making people happy. So basically, the question was again.
It's you. It's you. I'm just the messenger. You know, you're the actual person that people want to see.
Well, it's all teamwork. It's all about teamwork. But the question was about how did you manage not to get your footage back then confiscated by the police, because they tried to get your footage by declaring it as art?
Well, actually, I was very paranoid about the fact that I'd taken this tape. I knew something happened that night. You know, New York used to be one of those kind of places. And anybody, the people that have all been here know this experience. Somehow you went to a concert or to an event or something, and you walked out that night and you knew, wow, I was at something historic. You know, there's a couple of shows in your life you walked into, whether it be a gallery show or whatever. When you left, you knew that it was a happening thing. When I got, after shooting that night, I knew that I had 3 hours and 33 minutes worth of tape. And I knew I had something that was really kind of like, oh my God. So it became known by the police that I had this tape. Eric Shawn, he got a little bit of it on the news, and then it just became this big explosion. And so I was worried, because once it becomes evidence, then it's government property. So I thought, God, they're going to come take my tapes. They're going to take them, put them into property, and now I'm lost it. So my argument had always been, no, I'm an artist. and that's my art, and my art belongs to me. So this was really one of the first time cases where they actually used a copy as best evidence possible, because the excuse always is we need to have the best evidence possible, which is the original. And so I always held back on that. I had many court cases over it. At least I had 6 cops criminally indicted. Every one of their court cases, they had to go to court and argue the fact that it's my art and I get to keep it and like that. But it's the whole idea that I'm an artist, that's my art, it belongs to me. And being New York, especially at that period of time, the art thing carried some weight, because art at that time in New York was kind of a meaningful part of the whole culture. Art's kind of really taken a dive. I mean, it just doesn't have that presence anymore, what it used to have. But so anyway, I was able to keep the original and to get it a first generation copy made. And the first time we did it at the DA's office, there were like 3 tapes, different tapes that it was on. And Elsa was very helpful to me that evening, because I was also paranoid about getting arrested and losing the tapes. So when I would do a certain amount on one, I'd give it to Elsa. She'd run home, charge the batteries, take the tape home, change the tape, that kind of thing. So they actually lost 30 minutes when they were making the transfer. So I was kind of right about them not being that good at taking care of the evidence. So eventually we ended up doing it uptown at De Gaulle, I believe, or one of those studios.
Yeah.
And so we got it. So I was able to keep the original and to make a first generation copy, and it was fine.
All right. So Clayton, so my last question for you, and then afterwards, Ari, if you collected some questions from the audience, how do you feel about the book? I mean, of course, the timing was the worst timing, having a pandemic to launch the book, but how do you feel about your legacy being in a graphic novel?
Well, there's a couple of things. One thing is, it makes me wonder. I always like this point. I always like to point this out. Not sure it's relevant to anything, but it's relevant to me. I was waiting for these books to come here from China, because what we were going to do is we were pushing to get ahead of the Chinese New Year, because once we knew the New Year kicked in, it'd be a long time before we got the books. So all of a sudden we're ahead of the curve. Julian's pushing like crazy. He's getting it all hooked up. And all of a sudden, December 15th, we get a notice that there's some virus or something, and they're keeping the books in China. So all of a sudden, like, all the debates now are about the mask, about how, you know, the president stopped people in mid-March or whatever from entering the country. They kept the books out in mid-December because of the virus. They didn't stop the people until some routes didn't stop until mid-April. So we were way ahead of the curve with the book and the virus. That's just one of those curious things. Don't you find that curious, Julian?
I think it's fascinating. I think it was something, I mean, they definitely shut down the factory. But yeah, we were aware of about this anonymous virus already in mid-December because of the book, which is kind of fascinating that we were one of the first to talk about it. I mean, for us, it was just like, okay, the book is delayed because of a virus. Now we're all delayed because of a virus. But yes, we knew about it very early in mid-December.
You're in mid-March coming back from Germany, and all of a sudden you're told you can't come back. So
that's another story, yes.
The months ahead of the population and the president. So when you hear all these arguments now about he was yes, no, they knew in mid-December. But anyway, I'm really happy. Yes, it's a more difficult time to have a book. And as Ariel said in the beginning, if this was a typical event, we'd be all there like at Comic-Con or something. We could be signing books and selling books and doing whatever. With this, we can't. So it's made it hard. I think it's great to continue meeting everybody and seeing all the work that they did. And we just have to do the best we can to keep it going. And I think if we do that and keep marching up the hill, we'll eventually get there. Hopefully.
I mean, it also is very grassroots again, like back old school, like, you know, people sold their records from the trunk. In a way, we sell now the books for an Etsy store, and people can actually come to your storefront also to get it from you if they contact you, signed copies. So it is very grassroots, like the whole process of the book was. I mean, it was basically starting with like me recruiting a bunch of friends to help out with this and telling your story. So
another part of this, like the Greenwich Village Historic Preservation Society, the one who's doing this program here, they're very instrumental to saving, you know, landmarking buildings in the neighborhood, saving architecture. So in a way, all of us here are preservationists, and we're preserving old New York and the culture of New York. And it's good to be involved in a historic project. And for me, this is a history project.
Absolutely, yes.
And I think being with, this group and with, all of our different histories, it's a lot. It's just a rich kind of overlapping of what New York was able to offer. I think this book sort of, part of what it means to me was coming to the Lower East Side, was just how everybody made up the community. This isn't about yourself, one art star making a book. This is about a whole community coming together as a collective. And each one of those people in the collective does what they do best and makes that contribution to the book. And that part I think is great as well. So it's,
it really is a homage also to what you create, because what some people might not be aware of, that 161 Essex Street is in a way an unofficial community center of the Lower East Side. So in the olden days, before the virus, of course, you go to Clayton and there's always someone knocking on the window, coming in and out, and it was really bringing artists together. And in a way, while, we wanted to pay homage to you by creating like the video, the fumetti, the diversity of illustrations, even the diversity of the artists, also like the aspect of bringing a community of very different people together, from some people who, never did a graphic novel, from others who like have decades of experience, and bringing people together for a common goal is actually a wonderful thing.
Yes, that said, thank you for everybody.
So with this, the official part from our end is done. And so Ariel, if you have some questions collected, please share them with us.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been really, really beautiful. I'm so grateful for all of you and for all of your time and for your amazing artwork, which is such a pleasure to see. We do have a couple of questions. One is a follow-up about the Tompkins Square Park video footage. Was it used as evidence?
It was. It was used in at least 6 different trials. It was also used in departmental trials. And it was effective in getting the captain moved out of the precinct because he did such a terrible job that night. And it helped to get the chief retired because he had sort of disappeared off the field. And it had a lot of repercussions. There was cops without badges. So some cops got fired. So it actually had real consequences. I mean, there's no question I was hated for a long time. I was a marked man, but I survived.
And continue to. Gabe wants to know, do you have maybe a top 3 of your favorite Lower East Side institutions that have disappeared?
I'll tell you the one that's a shock to me that nobody gets is the pyramid's still there. The pyramid, grimy place it always was, and nobody's paying attention to it. Everybody, laments about, the Ritz being what it was, the Ritz gone, CBGBs, of course. I mean, there's so many different institutions that have disappeared, Charis. But I don't know. I mean, we just have to hope for the best after this whole thing is over and see where we land, because we're still dealing with the virus. We haven't even really gotten to the economy yet. So I have no idea how many businesses are closed in my neighborhood and how many will never be back or whatever. And so, there's a lot of tragedy waiting to happen. And also there's a lot of tension in the air right now in New York. So you got to be very careful. It's a very sort of volatile city. And, there's hundreds of thousands of kids with nothing to do. No school, no swimming, no sports, no jobs, no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a very difficult time. You can see the graffiti building up in the city. There's kind of an angry graffiti that's out there now. It's not like all fun and games anymore. It doesn't look like artists trying to get recognized. It's just more of an aggressive form of graffiti. It's just about like burying the city in graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of changes, and we'll have to see where it ends up. I mean, we all hope for the best, of course, and, just say we need leadership of some sort, and we're all doing the best we can to preserve what we got. And I think if we all carry on doing what it is that we do, I mean, we'll be okay. And I think Julian brought a lot of people together with this.
Yeah, Julian, this is actually the last question that we've gotten, which is, can you talk a little bit about your decision to work with multiple artists on this? And it seems like other projects as well, yeah?
Actually, no, this is the first time. So I have, I mean, 4 of my graphic novels exist in English. This is one of them, but there are a few other projects that only exist like in French or in German. And the other, normally I just work with one artist. It takes, so there are 2 aspects to answers, no, 2 aspects to the answer. Number one is, as I mentioned, we wanted to like showcase a little bit like the diversity of like the experience Clayton had. And there were really like little mini chapters. So this is of course represented in the different art. We have like, you know, one chapter is about like his caps. The other one is about CBGBs. What, you know, we didn't even touch upon that Clayton is also like one of the founders of the New York Tattoo Society and was able to make tattoos legal in New York again. There's so many different stories that people are not even aware. So buy the book, etsy.com/shop/ClaytonLES. The other thing was just like a practical reason. When Clayton and I started talking about it, you know, he was shocked when he learned that, you know, it can take easily 5 years until a graphic novel is done and published. And he was like, I don't have the time for this. That's too long.
71 years old.
Yeah.
10 years to get a graphic novel out. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, so by having a lot of artists being involved and doing like short, you know, the shortest one is actually like 1 page or 2, 1 page and 2 pagers. Some artists have like, you know, 10 pages in it. So it really is a different commitment for everybody. So everybody could take on a commitment that suited him or her. So it made it a little bit quicker also. Not that I didn't have to run after some people, but it was less of a commitment for people. And then I liked the idea that we had this mixture of some very experienced artists. I mean, Summer is probably one of the most experienced one who did a lot of graphic novels. And then people who only thought about it, like Sean, and just joins this. I mean, Jesse, it was also his first graphic novel, but he's like a fine arts painter for decades. So we really have a whole broad spectrum of different experiences. And also, I mean, I didn't even think about, someone pointed it out to me also, the people involved are very diverse. I mean, Sean is, you know, Filipina, Ray is Latino, I, you know, who knows what I am, but so like all the different experiences that we have. I mean, no, I was born in Germany to Colombian parents, so so it's like a whole, you know, it's a really New York book with a lot of real New York people, which makes it actually really great.
I agree. Thank you so much to all of you for being here and for your work. Thanks to everyone for coming.
Thank you.
After it's over, should we just ask a couple of people a couple of questions since we're here and we're not on air anymore?
Oh yeah, sure.
Like I see, and there was a note at the bottom that said Peter Kramer. Was he a viewer to the show?
Yes.
Like how many viewers did we have?
I'm not sure. It seems like we've had some people come in and out, but I would say close to 100.
Wow, that's good.
Wow.
Thanks for being here with us, everyone.
I hit the record button, so who gets the recording?
I get the recording, so we're gonna I'll edit it and post it on YouTube hopefully tomorrow.
Isn't that like was Kevin Harris, was he part of it?
Sorry?
Was Kevin Harris a viewer?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He was.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Because you know, part of it is I wanted to introduce some of the people like Kevin to you know, Greenwich Historic Society.
Oh, that's wonderful.
You have people like Kevin and Kramer in that listing. We had a good audience, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, we definitely had. I have to go, unfortunately, because my kids are complaining that they're hungry. But it's good seeing you all. Yeah, thank you for having us. And hopefully we'll all meet in person in the near future when things get a little bit easier.
What's for supper, Joey? What can we eat?
Shawarma chicken. My wife made shawarma chicken. It will be delicious.
Enjoy.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Have a good one, everybody. Stay safe.
Take care. Stay safe. Jesse, give me a call when you get a chance.